This is a game that I've made about 2 or 3 years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but this was a fairly early project that I made when I was, first learning how to script. And I just want you to quickly think and answer to yourself, what do you think is wrong with this game? Like, just take a look at it. And this is a very subjective question, right? I'm not necessarily looking for some big, grand, objective answer here. If there's something that you think that the game is missing, well then obviously you would be correct in that assumption. But it's important to ask this question as a player, right? Because there is a reason why certain games perform well and why some games die. And there's also a reason why the games that perform well and the games that die seem to have similar elements, right? Like there could be a tycoon game out there that's, really popular and really successful and has made so much money, but there's also another tycoon game out there which has been played a little bit, but nobody actually liked it. So even though both were tycoons, there's clearly a difference between them that makes one do well and one, not do well. And when it comes to random generation in games, I believe it works the exact same way. Because again, I came back to this little silly game that I made 2 years ago, just kind of see, what it's about, to see how I kind of made it. And this random generation aspect did actually pique my interest because I realized that this actually does have some potential. I mean, the most popular game in the world, Minecraft, has random generation. Something like Terraria has random generation, right? A lot of Roblox games out there do have random generation. And I thought it would just be interesting to answer from both a developer's perspective and the player's perspective as to what I think makes the difference between a good random game as opposed to a bad random game. Again, the video is opinionated, blah blah blah, it's all subjective, you get the idea. But I do hope you can understand most of my points, and if you think I got something wrong, feel free to leave a comment. Now, right before I get into that, I think it's very important to understand what I actually mean by a random generated game. I don't mean an actual game that was made by AI or something, right? It's still a real game made by a real person with real effort put into it. However, when I say random game, I mean a game where the core kind of gameplay of it is that it's not the same each time, right? Is that there's an element of randomness to it, and that element is big enough to actually shape the game to what it is. Like I brought up Minecraft as an example initially, and I believe that a lot of the reason why people play Minecraft is exactly because it feels new and fresh every single time. Can you imagine Minecraft with just a set map? Like every single world just looks the same. I bet it would get boring really quickly. And the same is true for this little snake game, right? The whole idea of the game is that it's random every time. The premise of the game seems to remain the same, that, there are snakes and you have to go down the snakes and do your best to not fall, but the way that you do that is different every single time. Now, for you scripting nerds out there, what I've effectively done was I made a function that, generates a random snake and gives it one of these random green colors. Then I made 1,000 of those snakes, with the very final snake being different from all of the previous snakes, right? Because this snake actually has a tongue that, looks at you like that. Now, when I discovered this project again, it got me thinking, what could I do to improve it, right? Which then inspired the idea for this video. So this video will not just be me yammering about why some random generated games are bad. It will be mostly that, but I will also make real adjustments and changes to the game to reflect what I'm saying. So you can actually see whether what I'm saying makes the game better or worse in real time. And I'll begin with actually the very first thing that my game got correctly, right? So let's give previous me a pat on the back, which is that random games need a clear start and a clear end. The big reason why a lot of randomness in games tends to fail is because there isn't really a clear objective in the game. It doesn't feel like you're going anywhere or progressing anywhere. It literally just feels like you're just somewhere doing nothing, right? Not sure what to do, not sure where to go, not sure where you even began to begin with. And that makes a game, I'll be honest, very boring. I've actually had a similar experience with the game No Man's Sky. So I don't know if you know about it, but the whole idea of No Man's Sky is that it's effectively an infinite procedurally generating universe, right? It looks beautiful. There's a lot of different planets, every creature is randomly generated. And there are still limits in place to not make the game look completely stupid, right? The art style of the game is still fairly consistent. And there is a beginning of the game in form of a tutorial, right? And there is, I believe, an ending to the game in regards to the story of it. I've never actually finished the game, But it does seem to have like an actual somewhat objective for you to do. But my biggest problem with No Man's Sky, and also why I basically stopped playing it, is because the objective just felt like a little side part of the story. And I'm not saying that as in like, oh yeah, we had the story and we had a bunch of side quests and like I got, too wrapped up in the side quests or whatever. It was just that the whole point of No Man's Sky wasn't the fact that you're necessarily trying to get somewhere. It was just the fact that you're just exploring this randomly generated world with no real meaning. It didn't feel like there was a real end to the game, And while No Man's Sky obviously is a very successful and popular game, I would actually argue it is successful in spite of this issue with a very vague progression system, right? I think it's a really fun game to explore. I think it's a really fun game to play with friends. I think that, building bases in the game and collecting resources and the survival element of the game is really fun. And I believe these elements are what made the game so popular. However, a game should not just be randomized through and through, but rather I believe have a set end, a set start, and have randomness in between that kind of dictates your own path of how you should get to the finish from the beginning. And if you actually look at my game, this is exactly what it does, right? It has a set beginning where you spawn on the very top, and it obviously has an ending, right? Because if I end up falling through the map, there is an actual base plate with a very final snake that, once reached will trigger some game over screen, which I haven't actually implemented into the game, but in a real game, that's what you would expect to happen, right? The other thing that I think my game does really well is indicating that progression is possible. It indicates the next step forward, because the concept of the game is that everything is going down, right? There isn't an element where it goes down and then it goes up and then it goes down. So it has random elements, but the gameplay feature of constantly going down remains constant. And it tells you that, hey, this is your goal, right? This is what you should be prioritizing, which is also why if someone might play this game, the first thing they might think of is to jump down, right? Because their brain automatically identifies that as the goal to beat the game. But now let's talk about what my game didn't do well, right? Let's talk about the reason why this game isn't yet a masterpiece and a hit with people and hasn't made me over $1 million yet. The other rule that I believe a lot of randomness-based games should follow is that there must be constraints within the randomness. Now, I somewhat just highlighted this with the idea of my game having a constraint of everything facing down. But in this case, I'm talking more about needing actual objective steps that players can follow to finish the game. The element of progression in my game is technically a constant, but it's more of a hint as to what you should be doing, right? Similarly to how in Minecraft, right, the world having a lot of different stuff and a bunch of different resources, that's not necessarily a unique thing that's a constant within the randomness, but this world does actually tell the players hey, listen, you should explore me, right? If you can craft different tools and, different items, then it means that there are other items that can craft better things. Similar to how my game indicates that going down is probably what you should be doing. However, like I said, this isn't the type of constant in the randomness that I'm talking about. When you take something like Minecraft, you have very clear steps to finish the game, right? Make a nether portal, go to the nether, find the nether fortress, kill the blaze, craft the eyes of ender, find the ender portal, and beat the ender dragon. This will always remain true for every single vanilla playthrough of survival Minecraft. And I believe random games need this familiarity. Randomness is fun as a new novelty that you can explore, but when it comes to actually finishing the game and balancing, gameplay elements around that, they have to be consistent. You can still make certain elements of them random, how, for example, the amount of blaze rods that blazes can drop is random, right? The position of, the fortress and the stronghold, those are random. Or even the fact that there's a random chance for an Eye of Ender to already be in the Ender portal. But imagine if the existence of a stronghold was random, right? Imagine you just start up a new world of Minecraft and it's oh, maybe there is a stronghold, but maybe there isn't, right? And maybe you just can't beat the game anymore. Or I just brought up how its position is randomized, but even that is semi-controlled, right? I haven't actually looked into it for a while, but I believe that the ways that, ender portals are generated is that they spawn in a circle formation around, your spawn location. And there's a limit to how far away they can be from spawn, right? But imagine if that just wasn't the case. Imagine if strongholds were just able to be all grouped up together with no limits to how far away they could be from spawn, right? You could literally maybe have a game where like every single stronghold is just at the world border, right? And even if that might be like insanely rare, again, you still want your games to be consistent, right? You want a game to constantly have an element that is always there that players can rely on to finish the game. Because this way, it gives the players more control over how fast they finish the game or whether they finish the game at all, and less to the random elements of the game. So to implement something like this into my own game, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Let's assume I've implemented a sort of hunger mechanic into the game. Like imagine some bar on the top of your screen that just keeps going down and down and down. And when that bar reaches 0, you obviously will die. So on second thought, I decided to actually make this bar. So here's a quick little script for it, if anyone's curious. I'm just taking the size. I have a countdown over here. And for this example, it's just 10 seconds. So now if I were to play the game, it's going to count down 10, 9, 8, 7, all the way until it says 0. If it hits 0, then I'm gonna die. And then it's just not gonna do anything else, right? So here we go. Now I'm dead. That's not good. Now, just for the sake of example, let's set this to be 120 seconds, right? So this gives us 2 minutes until we actually die. Okay, wait, small error. I should change this to 120 as well. But yeah, there we go. Now it should be working. There we go, amazing. And it actually is moving down weirdly fast. I thought 2 minutes would last us longer. But okay, now we have like an obvious struggle, right? We need to somehow find a way to fulfill this hole. So in the same way, for example, that like getting to the end requires an Eye of Ender, we clearly need something to take care of this hunger problem because this obviously isn't enough if we want to actually safely and consistently reach the bottom. So what we could do is we can introduce some sort of feature that consistently appears within the game. Again, consistently and not randomly. We want this feature to appear often enough to where the player doesn't actually have a chance to really run out of hunger as long as they're playing the game properly. And of course, there could be like some like randomized elements in there, but just for the sake of this video, what if, for example, inside of the script, when we're on snake number 250, then maybe instead of generating some regular snake, we could have a snake that has some unique item that's gonna raise this hunger meter. Because it's a snake, we probably could use an apple, right? I think that would work out. And yeah, and then, you know, depending on how many apples we want, so maybe like 5, we could then do something where like we have an apple on the 200 snake, on the 400 snake, on the 600 snake, and so on. So a very simple thing that I could do, honestly, is I could just make this red ball, which I'll just call apple. I'm gonna set it to be anchored and non-collidable, just so it doesn't fall. And I put this apple into replicated storage, which means that it technically doesn't exist in the game yet, but we can access it from anywhere at any time. Which, funnily enough, is actually not something I knew about when I first started developing, because the other types of snakes that are being randomly generated, instead of putting them into replicated storage, I just put them in like the void, just somewhere. If I actually check the position, they are 5,000 studs away from the spawn position. So yeah, new developers, you know, try to not do this. And what I'm thinking we could do, just for the sake of the video, is make the apple appear every 50 snakes, right? How does that sound? And what we could do is we could simply just check if whatever I currently is, we want to check if I divided by 50 would result in a whole number, right? Basically, is the number divisible by 50? And we could actually do this by saying if I, and then this percentage mark, 50, or sorry, not 20, 50 is equal to 0, then we'll do something. And this line of code effectively just checks if I is divisible by 50. Now, of course, we don't want this to be applied to the snake that we spawned on and also the very final snake, right? So we also need to say and I is not equal to 0 and I is not equal to 1000, like so. And we can just get the apple from replicated storage and we can clone it like so. We can position the apple above a certain point of the snake, right? So every single snake has this thing called entrance, exit, and some random part, right? And these parts called straight, which is effectively like, you know, kind of the base of the part. So what I'm thinking is we can just say new apple dot position is going to be equal to the position of the snake that we just generated, which is actually stored in this previous snake variable. So previous snake dot straight, right? And again, in this case, straight is just one of these parts, dot position, but then we want the snake to be a little bit above the snake, right? So I'll just add on, let's say like 4 studs above the snake, or maybe 5, I'm not sure. And then I guess we can say new apple dot parent is the previous snake. And now we actually need to like make sure that the player can actually touch the apple and refill their hunger meter. So I can just do that right here by saying new apple dot touched connect function. It's going to give us the other part that actually touched this part. And from there, we need to check if that part belongs to a player or not. So we can say if other parts dot parent find first child humanoid, then that means that the other part dot parent is a character. And from there, we can say local player is equal to game.players get player from character, and we'll give it the character. And then finally, we need to send a message to this player that, hey, listen, you touched the apple, please update your user interface. And this is where we get into slightly complicated scripting territory, but all you need to do is just add a remote event to replicated storage. Then we say game.replicated storage.remote event, fire client, and we fire to this player. And then in the local script right above this loop, we do the same thing, game, replicated storage. We're going to wait for child remote event just in case it hasn't loaded in yet. And we're going to wait for this client event like so. And so again, when we receive this event, we assume that it's because the player has actually touched the apple. And so here we can just simply say, okay, well then that means we should set count back to be 120, right? So it's initial value. And we can also then animate the bar back to being full. So yeah, there we go. So now assuming I have coded this correctly and no dumb little errors are going to show up, let's just see how much of an improvement this actually makes to the game. All right, so we immediately can see that our hunger meter is going down. Now, if I start traveling along these snakes, oh, there we go. I see the first apple. So let's jump down over here and explore this a little bit more. And I just fell off the map. Damn, okay. All right, let's try one more time, all right? So here we are, we're on the snake, we're chilling. There is an apple, like, somewhere, I don't know. And yeah, I'm just gonna go and find this apple to test out whether what I've made actually works or not. But while we're doing this, let's actually reflect on how much of a fun mechanic this actually is, right? Like, I'm not saying it's fun, I'm just asking, like, how much do you think it actually adds to the game? Because in all honesty, I actually quite like this. I think the hunger bar gives the player more of a reason to actually play the game and rush and, you know, try to find a way down. I think this is where the random elements of the game actually shine through, because now it gives us a lot more of a difficult time trying to find the apple, or maybe an easy time, right? Perhaps we might spawn right below some apple, right? Like in this scenario, right? So let's assume my hunger is like about to run out and I'm about to die, and then I swoop in and I touch the apple, and perfect, amazing. And all right, I guess I forgot to remove the apple, so this is a small issue. And the apple is like touching the snake, so okay, there are some improvements we can make. So again, let me make this like a 7 instead of a 5. And then, of course, when the apple gets touched, that's when we should destroy it. So that's my bad. I completely forgot about that. And perhaps also make hunger a lot more of a threat than it is right now. So let's say something like 70 seconds, right? So I'm just going to change all of these numbers to be 70. Yeah, and so again, with all of those, you know, pretty little changes, let's just test this out again. We can already see that, like, the hunger is declining fairly fast. And in a cool way, this actually gives my player a lot more of, again, a motivation to go and find this apple. But again, the initial question was, would something like this make this random game feel better to play? And I would say, honestly, it does, right? I actually find this a lot more fun now with this tiny little mechanic that I made in, like, honestly, like 10 minutes than what the game was 10 minutes ago, right? Back then, we had one purpose of the game, but it's so far and it's kind of boring, and randomness does get very annoying and, you know, repetitive after a while. But these apples occasionally do spice things up, and now, amazing. Look at that. Yeah, and now I just have to continuously keep falling down, finding new ways to get around, and there we go. Look at that. Another apple. So I can go and collect it, and there we go. My hunger is back up. And of course, there's a lot of changes you can make to this. Like, in all honesty, I feel like setting this to 30 seconds instead of 70 would actually make it a lot more fun and challenging. Or maybe that's just me. I don't know. Maybe 70 seconds feels like more than enough for you. But, you know, you could hopefully see how something like this would make the snake game a lot more fun. And I said this before, but you could still have some random elements in here. Like, perhaps you don't want the apples to be, like, at set points, like every 50 snakes. Maybe you want that number to be randomized, right? Like, maybe you want it to be every 60 to 70 snakes, or every 40 to 60 snakes, or something like that, right? Where, like, there's still consistency, but it's still varied enough to where, like, it still reserves that randomness. But, you know, going any further than that does destroy the point of this thing being a constant in randomness. And as you can see right now, this actually does help balance the game a lot, right? We have created a problem, but now we give the player a solution to the problem in a really fun, and again, I hate to keep using this word, but in a fun and consistent way. Alright, the next step, which is a little more noticeable in my game, and I'm sure you've noticed bits of this, is that you should try and ensure that your game avoids a soft lock or some sort of issue within the randomness. So again, to bring back Minecraft as an example, imagine if Minecraft just happened to not check for the position of the end gates before summoning them. Like, what if Minecraft just allowed strongholds to just summon inside of each other, right? Of course, the chances for that are really, really tiny, but I can imagine a world where somehow every single stronghold just decided to spawn right on top of each other, right? And let's say they spawned in such a way that all of the portals were just effectively destroyed, right? So now the game is unbeatable. Now, my game, of course, doesn't really have this. However, there are still the issues of this thing, you know? Like, you just look at this. Or even something like this, right? And the way that this is generated is that, like, let's say it makes a part, then it goes over here, then it goes over here, then it goes over here, and then goes back over here. So it does a whole 360 loop, right? And as you can see by the text, I am dead, unfortunately. But again, right, like, we need to make some sort of system that ensures that, you know, these constant loops aren't, like, a problem. And the way that I would do this is I would just make a counter of snakes. And what I would actually do to fix this, because if you actually look at the game, the way that these snakes, like, are connected to each other is that this is a down snake, right? Now, a down snake just goes forward, right? So down snakes don't really have the issue of colliding in one another. But when I take this straight snake, which is meant to be just, you know, just a regular basic snake, the way that it is positioned is that it's meant to always face left, right? So, you know, this is a straight snake, that now this is a down snake, and then we have another down snake. But then when we get to another straight snake, it goes left again. And the problem happens when you have a snake that goes left, so once, then twice, then 3 times, right? At this point, you already have the snakes collide into one another. So all we have to do then is we just have to ensure that, okay, when we have already generated 2 snakes, the next snake must be a downwards snake. And this is actually a very easy fix. So over here, I can just say local straight snake counter, and initially it's going to be 0. Now at the very top, I'm going to say if this straight snake counter, if it is more than or equal to 2, then what we should do is we should say, okay, local snakes, which is, again, this variable. Then we should say local random snake, which, again, is meant to be this variable, is not, in fact, going to be equal to a random snake in this folder, but instead, it's going to be equal to this upwards snake, which I don't know why I called it upwards. It should be a downward snake, but again, it's a 2-3-year-old project, right? So I'm actually going to move this line of code right over here, and I'm going to say else, and if snake counter is not more than or equal to 2, then we can make a random snake, right? However, in this case, we're just going to say it's going to be equal to workspace.snakes dot upwards, like so. And I do need to make this a variable outside of just the if statement. So I do need to say local random snake, like so, and I'm just going to remove this. There we go. And so if this becomes true, I'm going to say straight snake counter is going to be back to 0. However, if this happens, we obviously need to check if the snake is a straight snake and then increase this by 1. And luckily, I actually already did this here just to set its color to a random color. So I can then just say, okay, yeah, if snake.name is straight, then we can also say straight snake counter plus equals 1. And again, haven't tested this yet, but let's just see if this is actually going to fix my problem. And let's just look at it. It actually, in a way, seems like it has. Look at it. Yeah, so it has some loops, but I've actually yet to see something that goes into one another. Yeah, look at that. There we go. I just fixed the issue. I'm sure that past me 3 years ago is ecstatic about this information. So again, you know, that's just like a little technical advice to people making these games. But, you know, do ensure that randomness is still in a controlled environment, which I guess is kind of like the point that I'm trying to make with this entire video, is that randomness is good as long as you still have control over it. Just like some artificial intelligence, right? The main fear that people have is that it's going to take over the world and, you know, it's going to become its own entity, which it's not going to, because we have it under control. That's the whole point. I don't know why people say that. But, you know, people are afraid of AI, but then they go and they make games with randomness that isn't within their control. And then they wonder why the game has issues. This is also how Doors avoids having clipping issues, right? So Doors has randomly generated rooms every time that do have corners, that do have, upward and downward staircases. And Doors actually does it in a really interesting way, where if you happen to go like all the way back, a monster appears and like takes away some of your health and like teleports you to the most recent room, right? So they actually do it in a pretty cool way. But I am also certain that Doors does have some sort of mechanic built into place that ensures that rooms will not collide with one another. And of course, as a final thing, randomness must present a real gameplay loop, right? The same thing that I have just made here with these apples and all of that, right? Of course, it's one little feature, but like it does give us a reason to continue playing the game. And I'm just realizing that I might have made the hunger elements a little too quick. So I'm actually curious now, can I get an apple just in the nick of time? Let's see. And the apple is right there, and I just fell off the map. Okay. All right, perhaps 40 instead of 30 would be a better idea. But like I said, there is a very noticeable gameplay loop here. The randomness serves the gameplay loop, and it doesn't necessarily serve as the gameplay loop itself. And this game, honestly, is, in my opinion, a lot better than what it was initially, even though we only added, like, literally just 3 features, I'm pretty sure. And I guess just to finish this off and to make this a fully playable game, we can make it so that whenever players end up touching the base plate, so I can say script.parent.touched connect function, and we can then just kick them, and we can just say, you finished the game. Amazing. Of course, like a victory screen would probably be a bit better, but this also works for now. And the very final thing we can do is just once count reaches 0, as in, the player is supposed to be dead, we can then say game.players.localplayer.character.humanoid.health is equal to 0. So just then, as an example, if I just set all of this to be 5 seconds, right? Let's just see how this actually plays out. So we got 5 seconds to take the other apple. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Oh yeah, perfect. And if I respawn, oh yeah, great, awesome. And yeah, I do hope you learned something about randomness. This game actually is already public, so I will just link it in the description and the pinned comment. While you're checking out that link, I will also just do a quick little plug. Just if you're a scripter and you just think that tutorials just don't really do it for you, and you really want like a full guide on Roblox Studio, and you like my teaching style, I do have a course. It's like $30, so you can go check that out as well in the description and the pinned comment. And I'm also very close to 100k. Can you believe that? 100k subscribers. It's like, imagine if instead of 1,000 snakes, we had 100,000 snakes. That's like a whole, like look at that. Like if I just change up this number to be 100,000, and then if I play the game, it's even having trouble loading that many snakes in, right? Look at that. That's actually, that's so, damn, I might have to pause this, honestly. Alright, so this is what 100,000 snakes looks like. It literally generated this after a minute, right? And I can't even move my camera. This is stupid. So, again, my point being that 100,000 is quite a lot, right? So if you do learn and enjoy from these videos, then, do subscribe, because, again, it does mean a lot, and I'm very close to a pretty big milestone. But yeah, I will actually have to make some more changes to the game to make it multiplayer. Like, for example, like the apple disappearing when someone touches it. Probably not, the best game mechanic. And also like a round system where maybe like every 10 minutes or so, like the map gets generated over again. So I think that would be fun. But again, in terms of the main point of the video, which is randomness, I do hope that like what I've told you makes you think. I hope that you leave thinking of some cool ideas for potential games, or maybe even the game that I've made, right? Maybe you might have some cool ideas for that, which, you could leave a comment for that. But I do hope that you enjoyed. I do hope that you can now maybe look at some games that you play yourself and see whether they have randomness in them as well, and why that might work or might not work. And as always, we're back to basics. Thank you for watching.